Did you know that in the 1880s, Queensland had its own navy? This navy consisted of 2 gunboats, a torpedo boat, and it had several other supporting vessels that could be armed to support them as needed. All up, this armada had 11 vessels. Crazy thing is, 6 out of the 11 are still here. In and around Brisbane, hidden in plain sight, and I'm going to show you where they are. But why did we need a navy? Oddly enough, it's the same reason we built Fort Lytton. As a nation, we feared that we would either be raided by Russia or invaded by it. This is because the relationship between Russia and Britain had soured because of a war. And we in Australia were also going through a major gold rush. And Russian warships kept on entering our ports to say, hi. But the Russians were not the only threat. See, the Germans had taken a vast chunk of New Guinea and rather adoringly called it Kaiser Wilhelmsland. Once again, the Germans and the Russians were not the only threat to Aussie Eldorado, because the Dutch ruled the north, and the French had already started taking territories from the English, such as New Caledonia, which is essentially on our doorstep. But most concerning of them all, the only thing that Brisbane had to defend itself was these, when in actuality, they needed guns like these. You know, the guns like absolutely everyone else had. But why talk about ground-based artillery? Let's get back to our ships. The first ship that we ever got was the HMS Mosquito in 1884. The men on this boat showed how small this thing actually was. It could only carry 2 torpedoes and it had a very short range. So much so that it actually had to be sent here on like another ship. How crazy is that? And then there was the Guyanda, and oh my god, did it get up to some batshit insane stuff. Like threatening to blow up Parliament kind of crazy. Anyway, long story shortened substantially, the captain, whose name was Henry Towney Wright, was bankrupt and very fond of gambling, and fond of alcohol and living well beyond his means. So his higher-ups, who were stationed in an older version of this building, also in the same spot, this is found here if you wanted to know, started noticing that the captain was spending too much, so they decided to replace him with his second-in-command, Lieutenant Taylor. As soon as Lieutenant Taylor came aboard, Captain Towney Wright was like, yeah, nah, you ain't taking my ship, and took him prisoner. At this point, he was like, I don't recognise your authority. I answer only to the Navy. Give me my money, let me keep my job, or I'm going to blow you up. He was also wanting to sail to Sydney to talk to his superiors who he believed would have his side. If this wasn't bad enough, downstream Fort Lytton was like, oh yeah? How are you going to get past our guns and mines, eh, bruh? So yeah, 2 of our major defences that were meant to defending us from Russia were threatening to blow one another to kingdom come. So instead of deploying the colonial militia or something else, the government did the sanest thing it's ever done. They called the police. Yep. Despite the fact that this ship had these Nordfeld machine guns, saner heads prevailed and the captain was arrested and the lieutenant released. But it's not all embarrassing stories for this ship, for it went on to become the first ship in the Navy to send a message from sea to land, which doesn't sound like much until you realise World War I happened only a few years later. Not to be outdone, Brisbane had a massive flood and the Paluma loosed its moorings and ended up washing into the Botanical Gardens, which left the Brisbaneites sort of scratching their heads and wondering, how do you get a 360-ton warship out of a park without damaging her? The answer came in the form of another flood the very next week, which washed her back into the river. Now, remember I said they are hidden in plain sight? Well, the first 3 are hidden in plain sight as you're ever likely to hide anything, because they're a part of the Tangalooma wrecks. These were the auxiliary gunboats Stingaree, Brim and Dolphin. Next, you will find the Guyanda sitting at the bottom of a cliff at Woody Point. Sadly, she's really starting to degrade, and I don't think she'll be with us much longer, so go and have a look at her while she's still there, hey? Yeah, really magnificent ship. Now, whilst the Paluma was scrapped and thus not on our list, her main gun and that of the Guyanda were found buried under the naval stores at Kangaroo Point. They were dug up in 1977, 1983, and you can still see them at the very back of the Maritime Museum. But if you think that that's the only buried treasure of this fleet, you'd be dead wrong. For you see, our next vessel was none other than the Miner, and apparently it was dumped onto Bishop Island, and is there to this day. So, according to the map, that thing over there, what you can see just here, apparently that is Bishop Island. So around here somewhere is the Miner. It's buried in this area somewhere. Yeah, but I reckon if I walked across that, I'd be up to my armpits in mud. I don't think I'd make it very far, and I'm not going to chance it. So I'm going to keep on looking around and see what else I find. Who knows? Now, if we travel from Bishop Island over to Myrtletown Reserve, which contains the Royal Australian Navy ruins, we find a sign that says, "If you find her, this is what she looks like. If you locate her, please treat her with respect. She's precious." Speaking of precious, remember that story about the Gayunda aiming its guns at Parliament House over a pay dispute? Well, guess what the Palumas, and one of the original 24-pounders is aimed at these days? Yep, you guessed it. Parliament House. Seriously? I kid you not. But seriously, government funding could really help this place. They do a great job in preserving our history, and I would love to see these signs get the love and attention they actually deserve. Don't you? Please like and subscribe. Cheers. Thanks.